This is The Beautiful Truth, where the expression is still free.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
And you're very welcome. This is The Beautiful Truth on breakfornews.com with Fintan Dunn reporting on the 26th of March at 9 Eastern. I'm here with an update on the situation with regard to blood pressure medications and their potential role in the severity or infectivity of COVID-19. And we're going to be taking a look at latest data out of Italy, which is dated the 25th yesterday, and it refers to analysis done by the COVID-19 surveillance team. Let me take that up here and let you have a look at it. So here it is, based on data available March 20th of 2020. And as before, we get a breakdown across the different regions of the severity. You see Lombardy there now, 68% of cases in Italy. We'll be taking a look at some of the detail on the patients. That's the median age of death, standing at 80. And take a look here at the male-female distribution ratio and age. We'll come back to that in a moment. We move on to the very interesting one, which is relating to the blood pressure issue. Hypertension there, 73.8% of patients. That's a very high number, and of course that's the reason for the concern that there might be a role because of the fact that blood pressure medications use the ACE2 receptor in your blood pressure regulation system, and so does the virus. Potential for interference there, and concern from clinicians in the front line that those who are actually treating patients are encountering just too much cardiac blood pressure issues and wondering why. Could the medications be involved? Well, the various cardiac and other bodies like that of doctors around the world, they've all said, no, there's no scientific basis to say that. That's true, but that's mostly because we haven't had the time to get the scientific basis, something which the FixCovid19.com project is attempting to address. Come to that in a moment also. So let's take a look now at some of the symptoms which the patients had, and a summary of the medications issue. Treatments before and during. So we'll take a look at the before hospitalization figure, because that's the one that concerns us most. So let's see. Before hospitalization, 36% of COVID-19 positive deceased persons followed ACE inhibitor therapy and 16% angiotensin receptor blockers. This information can be underestimated because data on drug treatment before admission were not always described in the chart. So we're seeing there that 52% of those who were deceased were on these blood pressure drugs, the ACE and ARB. Now, that's concerning in doubly really, because there was some hope that perhaps we would see a disproportionate showing by the ARB, angiotensin receptor blocker drugs, which were technically more likely to produce the expression of ACE2 that would increase the potential infectivity of people. But if you can see from the data here that there was a 2-to-1 ratio, so 2 out of 3 people who died who were taking blood pressure medications were taking the ACE, and the other 1 out of 3 were taking the newer ARB drugs. So that means that potentially, and only hypothetically, both classes of drugs could be involved in this issue, and therefore both of them could present a risk to you. But I'd like to show you one other thing about that in the male-female ratio, which we saw going by earlier on. And there you see that the blue bar there is much, much larger than the red. You see that? Red bar is the women, blue bar is the male. And you see it's highest, of course, from 70 to 90 years old. So if you are a male with high blood pressure over the age of 70, boy, are you the target risk for this virus. And so, those are the issues that concern and have concerned us. And it's precisely one of the reasons, key reasons, why Dr. James Freeman in Tasmania has set up fixcovid19.com to begin to assemble data on which medications people were on around the world, so as that we can start to get a handle on whether different medications would pose a potential risk to those who contract the virus. So, can you reliably come off of these medications? Answer, not unless you get medical advice, because currently there is, as international bodies have said, no scientific evidence that these drugs play a role. Nevertheless, there is a great deal of concern. So I believe that you have the right to make these kind of choices yourself, or to be aware of the issues so as that you can sit down and have an informed discussion with your clinician about these choices. A great practitioner, Dr. Peter Osborne, who is a great educator as well. And we're going to take some material from him about this issue of whether you could come off these medications and what's really going on with it. I think you will find that you're going to learn more about blood pressure issues and medication in the next literally few minutes, because this is not long, than you've ever heard before with Dr. Peter Osborne. Take it away.
The studies that show blood pressure medication, or rather blood pressure can be reduced, are called the DASH studies. This is just a long series of research studies that have been going on for decades now. DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, hypertension being high blood pressure. Now, what these studies show is that people who eat processed food and MSG and excessive salt and don't get enough magnesium, potassium, and calcium have higher blood pressure. So if you really want some of the best take home for that is to make sure you're eating foods that are rich in calcium, magnesium, and potassium, and minimizing processed food. And I would even say this: minimize your processed food and your blood pressure will most likely go down. That I've not seen that fail a single time in 20 years of visiting with people and helping them nutritionally resolve blood pressure issues. How high blood pressure medications can actually cause nutritional deficiencies. So one of the big problems with the medications is they can cause vitamin and mineral deficiencies. So let's use a couple of examples. I'm going to use example of one class of medications given to treat high blood pressure are the diuretics. And there are a number of different types of diuretics. There's things like Lasix, which is a very common one. Then there's another type of diuretic called hydrochlorothiazide, which is a HCT, for those of you who might be taking that. These are diuretics, and what they cause is they lower blood pressure through water loss. So they lead to less water in the system, thus lowering or reducing the pressure, the pressure on the arterial walls as it's being measured, right? So diuretics cause water loss. So one of the big issues here is if a diuretic causes water loss, in a sense, it's a form of dehydration, which we all know is not good for us. So taking diuretics long-term to manage blood pressure, which creates a form of dehydration. First and foremost, water, you're 70% water, and if you're chronically dehydrating yourself for the sake of lowering your blood pressure, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, one of the other things that diuretics cause, they can cause potassium, magnesium, calcium, and zinc deficiencies, meaning they can cause the loss of these minerals through the urine. Through the excess diuresis, they can create a mineral deficit issue. That's why certain diuretics, when a doctor prescribes them, they also prescribe potassium, because they know that those drugs can create potassium deficiency, which can actually cause heart disease. Remember, potassium loss causes heart electrolyte disturbance because potassium is an electrolyte. Potassium, magnesium, and calcium are all electrolytes, and so they play a role in the way the heart contracts and the way the blood vessels themselves. Remember, the blood vessels are muscles. They contract, relax, and so if we are taking a diuretic in the name of lowering blood pressure that's creating spasm in the muscle, because what happens when we're electrolyte deficient? We develop muscle spasm. Well, the blood vessels are muscles. And so if the blood vessels start to spasm, we can actually increase the pressure through spasm. And this is oftentimes, a lot of times this is step one, is generally, and again, may not be your exact experience, but I've seen this time and time again with people, is diuretics are one of the first go-tos. And then when the diuretics start to create mineral loss, and that leads to a slow increase in the blood pressure again, then usually what happens is the person gets another prescribed drug. So they end up getting something like an ACE inhibitor, or an ARB, an angiotensin receptor blocker, or a calcium channel blocker.
I was using Google Analytics and hated it. With Aribi, I can create any funnel, even across domains.
So these different meds all have different side effects, but one of the group classes of side effects with these types of medications is they can actually cause CoQ10 deficiency, and they can also, many of them will lead to zinc deficiency. And if you tuned in a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how ARBs actually can cause leaky gut. They cause gut damage. And that gut damage can lead to malnourishment, because one of the type of gut damage these drugs cause is villous atrophy, which leads to malabsorption of vitamins and minerals. So this one, as a whole class, causes malnutrition. These other ones have kind of select mechanisms of action. But I want to go back at this because I want to kind of walk you through. We're talking about lowering blood pressure. So here are the common meds and the classes of medications that are designed to help you lower your blood pressure. But the problem with this is they can create a nutritional deficit, and that nutritional deficit can actually be linked to an elevation in blood pressure. One of the things that we know, there's a series of studies in science, and these have been going on for several decades now. The series of studies are called the DASH studies. If you've ever heard of these, DASH studies have been ongoing for several decades. And the DASH studies, DASH stands for, it's an acronym. In medicine, we love these acronyms. Dietary approaches to stop hypertension. So DASH, dietary approaches to stop high blood pressure, basically, right? And the decades and decades of data that have been collected through the DASH studies, what do they show? They show that, this is a horrible marker, we're going to switch it out. They show that eating foods with too much salt, we're going to abbreviate that NaCl, and eat not enough foods with potassium and magnesium, so high foods with increased salt and low food quantities with potassium, abbreviated as a K+, and magnesium and calcium, causes high blood pressure. That's what these studies show, and it's all diet, meaning that when they take these patients that are eating high salt foods, high processed foods with lots of salt, and low vegetables and low fruits, when they reverse that and go high vegetables, higher fruit, and no processed salt, what ends up happening is their blood pressure normalizes. Now, when we say eat right, this is a great place to start. Okay, it's a great place to start just based on these DASH studies. But think about this. So what did we learn from this? Is that we learned that if you increase potassium, magnesium, and calcium and lower salt, then your blood pressure is better regulated. Well, what did we just say? That if you're taking these medications, they cause magnesium, calcium, and zinc deficiency. How are you ever going to regulate your blood pressure properly? You're not. And that's the whole point. And that's why getting on one of these medications usually doesn't end. It leads to the next medicine, leads to the next medicine, leads to the next medicine. And what actually, at the end of the day, what you never really truly understand or know, if you follow that route, is why you have high blood pressure in the first place. Like, what causes high blood pressure? So we can dive into some of those as well. So again, the pattern for many people is they get a diagnosis of high blood pressure. They get put on medicines to lower the blood pressure. The medicines that are being used to lower the blood pressure actually cause nutritional deficiencies that can cause high blood pressure, so then they get on more medicines. And if we look at the next level of medicine down here, CoQ10 and zinc, one of the things that CoQ10 deficiency causes is it's actually been shown to cause congestive heart failure, CHF, congestive heart failure. It's actually CoQ10 deficiency also causes an increase in blood pressure. So does that make sense? I mean, make sense of it for me. I can't make sense of it. I can't make sense of justifying giving long-term medications that suppress nutrients that can actually regulate blood pressure unless there's a malignant high blood pressure scenario where your life is in such jeopardy or in such danger that if you don't take a medicine immediately that you are going to stroke out or you're going to have a heart attack. And that's very rare. Most people that go into the doctor with high blood pressure have had it for a few years. They're overweight, they're eating poorly, they're not exercising, and their diet's pretty bad. And that, again, the generic advice is eat right and exercise, but not to what degree of specificity, and not to what does eat right mean. Because a lot of doctors have a belief, the same belief that a lot of patients have, which is to eat right means, you know, go and buy the healthy choice like microwave dinners. That's healthy because the box is green. Like for many doctors, that's their limitation in knowledge. They're no smarter about nutrition than you are. And actually, after watching this video, you'll probably be a lot more updated about nutrition and blood pressure than the average common doctor is.
So that's a great summary, and I advise you to check out Peter's other videos in the links below in the video. And of course, subscribe to our channel and click on that bell if you want to get notified of upcoming episodes. All right, that's about it for this edition. I hope we've covered that issue of blood pressure medications for you in a way that illuminates it. And I will, of course, bring you any developments in that as we move from hypothesis to some kind of scientific proof, or at least a direction in terms of the risk of these medications. But that's it for this edition of The Beautiful Truth. I will be back with that soon. I hope you can join me for it. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunn reporting.